Hi, and welcome to the Camelback Ventures webinar for the 2018 application. We are so excited to have you all here today. We've got almost 100 people on the call, which is really exciting. And we are so excited to read all of your applications and learn about the great work that you're doing in education and social impact and community work across the country. We're going to go ahead and get started. So first up, I just want to give a quick overview of how the call is going to go. We're going to start with some introductions, like I'm doing now. And just so you all know, you're all muted for the call, but you're welcome to unmute yourself during Q&A, and you can also type in the chat box at any time to ask questions. Then Erin, our founder and CEO, is going to give an overview of the organization. Then Elizabeth on our team is going to give a quick rundown of program. And then John will go over some application and selection details. Then we'll also have a Q&A opportunity with some of our fellows. So on the call today, there's more of our team. I'm Amanda. I run all of our creative and marketing and our recruitment process. And at the bottom are some of our fellow ambassadors. And everyone's going to talk today, so we won't get too into introductions, but just so you know, that's who's here. So first off, Aaron has talked about how genius is equally distributed, but opportunity is not. And this was kind of his inspiration for starting Camelback.
Particularly when I got started with Camelback, less so now. People would just say things to me like, about entrepreneurs of color and women that they just weren't ready yet. And that always struck me as odd because it sort of felt like coded language about some bias that maybe they were unaware of, or at least uncomfortable to sort of speak out loud. My perspective is that we're all sort of half-baked. We all have a ways to go, and it's just about making a decision, right? About making a decision about who you're going to invest in, and whose leadership you're going to invest in, who you're not. And I think that actually we've just made the choice to say that certain people are just not ready yet, because we all aren't. And so how do we help them get ready? And so, we do a whole set of things because we believe in the entrepreneurs and their leadership and try to help them grow their leadership. What that has led to over the last 3 years is a little bit of the following. So we worked with 33 fellows in the last 3 years. 95% of them have identified as a person of color. 60% have identified as women. In our first 2 classes, we invested in 21 actually fellows, $800,000 in those first 21 ventures. To date, they've raised over $14 million. And so, for every dollar that we've been able to directly put into their venture, they have been able to raise another 17 more. And I think that just sort of speaks to some of the traction that they've been able to get post-fellowship, and we're sort of proud of some of those things. You can see some of the organizations that have received funding from our fellows have received funding from the Aspen Institute to New School Venture Fund to the Walton Family Foundation. And the last 3 years, actually, and Andrew who's on this call is one of them. Camelback Fellows have been 10% of the Forbes 30 under 30 list. So, since the beginning, we have been able to begin to change the paradigm and change the archetype of what an education founder, education leader looks like in the space. And we just sort of think if we've been able to do this in the first couple of years, what we can do moving forward, and are excited about you all, and excited to get to know you through the application process.
Cool. Thank you, Erin. Next up is going to be Elizabeth, who's going to talk about what the fellowship actually includes and the process that founders go through to get to that point where they get to the 14 million collective Forbes 30 wins.
Awesome. Thank you, Amanda. So my name is Elizabeth, and I am the Director of Venture Excellence at Camelback Ventures. And so that means that I am responsible for planning and executing the fellowship program. So as much as we tell entrepreneurs not to read off their slides, that is what I'm going to do right now, as our recent fellow, Tony, gives a great segue into the program focus. So a lot of programs give you money and then disappear. Camelback is different. Their curriculum taught me how to actually run a successful startup. Design sprints helped me prioritize and develop our new product, and workshops on hiring and managing talent helped me figure out who I needed to hire and how to be a better leader. So a big part of the fellowship program is an entrepreneurial curriculum that we've designed to help founders build a solid foundation to accelerate the growth of their venture. This curriculum is based on core competencies that we believe are critical for ventures and founders at this stage in the game after researching the top reasons why startups fail and then how to mitigate that risk. So most of the curriculum is delivered at our summits in interactive and purposeful workshops. There are about 25 sessions over the course of the 6-month fellowship, so that you can walk away with new knowledge, tools, work products that you can apply right away. So for example, we have a whole suite of workshops to communicate your pitch in a compelling way at any time to anyone. And one fellow told us how our workshops got him so comfortable with this that he was able to pitch someone next to him on an airplane and is now in talks with that person to invest around $500,000 in his venture. So we're doing something that works. So there are 3 summits over the course of the 6 months, each in one of Camelback's major cities, so New Orleans, Brooklyn, and Oakland. These are meant to be a mix of fun and functionality. We have fellows stay in what we call the Camelback Community House, so an Airbnb that accommodates everyone. We do workshops during the day, and then we have a mix of chill and networking nights. And then Summit 3 ends in our graduation and showcase. And so that's our biggest fellow event. And finally, so for coaching, each fellow has a dedicated coach throughout the program. Since you can read a bit more on the slide, instead I'll give you a couple examples of what this looks like. So one recent coach had recently sold an ed tech company, and she was looking for a new challenge. She wanted to share what she'd learned. And so she coached a couple of our ed tech fellows last year. And then we had another coach who launched his own school in the Bronx, ran that for a few years, and then he turned his attention to growing his coaching practice. So we were lucky enough to have him work with one of our school leaders last year. So hopefully that answers some of the basics about the program focus, the summits, and the coaching, and then I'm happy to answer any questions later.
Cool, thank you, E. The program is very in-depth. It's a really impressive fellowship program. We've got more information online, but I wanted to have E give a run-through of some basics. Next up is John, and he's going to talk a bit about the application and selection process.
Thanks, Amanda. More info about the application process is going to be available on our website, and you can, of course, ask more questions about it later. We have 3 rounds in the application process. 2 of these rounds are written applications, and the last round is a video interview. Each round is carefully designed to make sure that we get the info we need to make decisions. Round 1 is about you and your organization, and you will receive the application round 1 questions after this webinar. And round 2 is about your team, your market, the people you serve, and your budget. So we are starting the application on January 4th, and that's when it launches. The application will, first round of the application will be available until January 26th. We get a lot of questions about what makes a successful applicant, and there are 4 things that I'll highlight in this call around what that is. I'll be putting out a blog post shortly that will get at some more tips on how to write a great application as well. As I wrote a blog post last year that is still available. So first off, it's that you should be specific. Last year, when describing their organization, well-written applications put that information that highlighted their point in the first 2 sentences. If you read the first 2 sentences, you already know what the rest of the paragraph should be about. They wrote short, punchy sentences, and they got to the point quickly. They then backed their sentences up with research or experience. Second point is to be real. Some applicants submit answers they think we want to hear, but we want to actually hear your honest and real answers. We need to know if and how we can serve you well. The purpose of Camelback is to support entrepreneurs. We look for entrepreneurs who back up the hype with humbleness. Thirdly, it's to engage your community. Strong applicants engage their targeted audiences regularly and run tests or pilot programs with their users. They tell us what has happened as a result of engaging with your audience or when you piloted your ideas. We endeavor to constantly learn at Camelback, and we'd like to hear what you've learned from your community and your work. And finally, it's to ask for help. When you're in the thick of an application, it's hard to get a higher level view. That's where friends, confidants, and copy editors come in. I'd recommend you build in at least 30 minutes to an hour of feedback from others into each of the first 2 rounds of the application process. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Amanda.
Cool. Thank you, John. So like I said, or like John said, there's going to be a lot more information available on the website, but that's an overview. I'm excited to introduce a new thing we're doing this year called Fellow Ambassadors. That is Wisdom, Yanel, and Andrew. The idea on this call, or for the future with Fellow Ambassadors, is that starting in January, there's going to be a form on the website where you can go online and request a 20-minute phone call with Fellow Ambassadors. It's not a phone interview or anything like that, so don't sweat this conversation. The idea is that this conversation would be an opportunity for you to really learn about the experience from someone who actually did it, hear from fellows what they liked, what they didn't like about it, and it's not just us presenting to you. So I'm going to have each of the 3 fellow ambassadors introduce themselves. Wisdom, if you're there, do you want to go first? Cool. You know what? Let's do first. I think Wisdom might have been joining a little bit. You ready to go first?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Cool. So just general introduction?
Yeah, why don't you give a little bit about your organization, what you do, and yeah.
Sounds good. Yeah, so hi everyone. Really excited to chat with you all today. My name is Yanel Selman. I was in the most recent Camelback cohort, just finished up earlier this year. My organization is called PS 305, stands for Public Schools 305. If you're from Florida or familiar with like Pitbull's music, you'll know 305 is a nickname from Miami. And we're Miami's first and only education advocacy organization, really focused on organizing families and teachers for educational justice. My background was I was a teacher and an organizer out in the Bay Area, studied out in Chicago, but was born and raised in Miami, so came home to found this organization. And Camelback was a huge support throughout this first sort of startup year, so I'm happy to chat about the experience.
Cool, thank you, Yanel. And I think I see Andrew on there as well. Andrew, are you ready to give a bit of an intro about Lifted? Cool.
Yeah, definitely. Hey everybody, Andrew Hill. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Lifted, and we do special education progress monitoring and reporting. So we allow educators to track their students' progress on learning goals, academic or behavioral, and increase transparency between the education staff as well as parents and administrators, purely for students with disabilities or special needs, pre-K through 12th grade. Prior to starting Lifted in 2015, I was doing my MBA at Cal in Berkeley, and was previously a technology consultant. So I'm in the Bay Area, happy to talk about ed tech and for-profit and sort of this ecosystem and where Camelback fits into that picture. I think that's it.
Cool, thank you, Andrew. And I know Wisdom is logging on right now, but to give you context, Wisdom is a school founder from Denver, Colorado, as it says on there. So we'll just chill for a second. I know he's logging on right now. And actually, maybe we'll continue, and then once he gets on, I'll have him do an intro. So, Q&A time. So we are going to do the 3 top most asked questions in the pre-submitted section. Thank you to everyone who submitted one beforehand. It really helped us figure out what you guys were more interested in learning about. So these 3 were asked by a lot of people. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the first one, which was, what makes the Camelback Fellowship different than other accelerator programs out there? And I'm going to throw this to the fellows. I know that Andrew and Yanel have both been in multiple fellowships, some while also during Camelback. So if you guys can just jump in and share how it was different for you guys.
Sure, I'll start. This is Yanel. I was in 3 fellowships this last year, sort of at the same time. So definitely got, sort of like simultaneous comparisons about each different program. For sure, Camelback was the most comprehensive in terms of supporting not just my venture and my organization and what I was trying to do, but me as a person and as a leader. The sense of community with Camelback is unlike anything else I've literally ever been a part of. It's just this deep connection with people all over the country who are as passionate and, you know, doing incredible work. And it's not just the current cohort you're with, but also, you know, everybody who's previously been involved, and it extends even further, right? Like I was at a funder meeting on Monday, and the funder like was a big fan of Camelback, right? A lot of times I'll be in meetings and people, I'll mention Camelback and people just like say incredible things about it. So there's this, I think, whole community of folks in the education space that are supportive of Camelback, and it's such an amazing group of people to be part of, and a really inspiring experience. So I think that was like the biggest difference. A lot of the other fellowships I did were more tactical, and this one was just tactical and strategic, and got to me at a sort of deeper, more visceral level as well.
So I would agree with all of those, and I'll just keep mine brief. I think like brand value is huge, as Janelle mentioned, and anyone in education knows about Camelback at this point, and I think it's pretty impressive after 4 years. So that's super helpful in just as many ways as you can imagine. I think the tactical piece is also pretty interesting. So what you'll find a lot of times with accelerators is the focus on like growth, but specifically within education, the growth is very different because of our sales cycles, or we're building schools, or we're in nonprofits. And it's a completely different lens. So being able to recognize that and have others around you who are also in that same sort of pool, rather than being in a program where you have a lot of different types of interests. And then I would lastly just say, like, there are a few things that I took away from Camelback around like hiring, managing teams, building culture that we really took to heart, and it gave us a framework or a foundation rather, to build upon. Without that, like, we were just kind of shooting in the dark with how many engineers we need to hire, or how we thought about customer success or school engagement. So those tactical pieces are pretty pivotal, especially at this stage.
Cool. Thank you both. Wisdom, are you there? I thought I saw that you might be in there. Is that in there? Oh, I see him. Could you unmute Wisdom? We'll see. Okay. Wisdom, I think you're having some technical difficulties, so you might need to see if you can unmute yourself for that. We'll go ahead and go to the next question, which was, what is the right stage for ventures to be at when they come to Camelback? So a lot of people ask this question. I will gonna go ahead and let Aaron take this one first, and then if fellows want to jump in after, they can.
Sure, thanks, Amanda. So the answer to this question is that I think our sweet spot as an organization is a company or org that is beyond the idea stage, but hasn't necessarily yet proven proof of concept. And I know that doesn't have a dollar amount or a number of years attached to it, but I think that's purposeful. I think we've just sort of seen there's no formula to this, right? Like oftentimes things might take you a little bit longer because you're trying to leave a full-time job, or it just takes longer to raise money, or whatever it might be. And so we try not to get stuck on like how long you've been doing it or how much money you've raised. I think if you were to pin us down and sort of force us to put numbers on those things, I think if you raise more than $1 million coming into Camelback, you might be a step too far, but there are always exceptions. At the same time, we've also had folks come into the fellowship who have raised $0. So I think that is possible too. When I say, from idea to, to proof of concept, I guess what I mean by idea is, you have an idea, it mainly lives in your head. It might be on a piece of paper, but it's not particularly fleshed out. The application might be the first time that you're really putting pen to paper in a serious way. I think if you're at that stage and you're not 100% sure how committed you are to this idea just yet, I think Camelback would be too early. There are some other programs. We have some good relationships with places like 4.0 schools that I think, offer programming that would be good for you if you were at that stage. On the other bookend, if you have, if you've proven your model and you're, trying to expand, if you're a nonprofit, let's say you're trying to expand to 4 other cities, or if you're, launching a school and you've already opened your school and you're trying to go from 1 school to 3 schools, that is a step too far for Camelback. And again, there are other programs, depending on what you're doing, that make more sense, whether that be Charter School Growth Fund or, an accelerator of some other type, or maybe like a venture capital firm if you're doing tech. So yeah, hopefully that gives people good parameters, but I'm happy to sort of refine and answer questions if people still are curious about specific fact patterns.
No, that was good. Thank you, Aaron. I know that Wisdom is here now. Cool. I just saw you unmute yourself. Wisdom, do you want to just give a little pitch of Hadanu, and then if you have an opinion on being a school founder and the stage you were at in Camelback, you can share it.
Sure. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I hope so. Okay. My name is Wisdom Amuzu, and the organization is called the Hadanu Collective, and that's just a half Korean, half Ave phrase, which means to humbly offer a solution. What we do is we create centers inside of schools where students have access to authentic education. And then separately, we're opening a full-time school based on our model. I think that's the short of it. And in terms of right stage, if you're a school founder, I don't think I have much more to add. I think Aaron was pretty clear on that.
Okay, cool. Andrew or Yanel, did you have an opinion on stage? If not, we can go to the next one. Cool. All right, neat. The next question, this is the last pre-submitted one, and then it's open for anyone to jump in. This last question was, how does the Camelback community share knowledge and or opportunities? So for this one, we've done a couple different things. I know Yanel was talking, and Andrew were both talking a bit about the community and how impactful it has been for them. Some of the ways that Camelback tries to support this, we use Slack as a team to communicate, and we also communicate with the different fellow cohorts this way. And we recently started a Slack channel that has all of the alumni in one place. And we share opportunities we hear about there, resources or cool news and advice. And I think I've seen a lot of fellows use it. For example, Andrew actually answered a question that somebody had recently. Somebody asked about hiring developers and if they were good resources for finding folks of color. And Andrew had some good thoughts on different dev studios. And it's just a great place to kind of take advantage of the collective knowledge of this group all at once. We also recently had our first family reunion, which was really fun. We were out in the Bay Area. It was beautiful. We did some workshops, and it was also just hanging out and building opportunity for people to connect. I also know that multiple classes have run into each other at conferences, especially places like the New Schools Venture Fund Summit, some stuff in New York. I know a couple people connected at the NationsWell Summit this year. So fellows tend to be pretty good about connecting with their cohort, and we're working on supporting, intra-cohort connections. Fellows, do you have any thoughts on this one, or any other team members want to jump in?
I'll just say for our cohort, the most recent, we have a very active group text. I feel like we text every day, several times a week at least, just about all the stuff Amanda was saying, is anybody at this conference? Does anybody apply to this accelerator? Does anyone know about, this opportunity? So it's just constantly a reinforcing sort of support system. And then even in person at conferences or at trainings or whatever, I feel like folks are really open to making, introductions or connections or giving immediate feedback to sort of support the work. So just super helpful.
Cool. So now this is just regular Q&A time. I got a question in the chat. If the question was, could you give a quick rundown of the different types of ventures that have been a part of Camelback beyond the educational space? So we primarily work with education-focused ventures, but some of that we've started to explore opportunities where it's sort of like education and a step in another direction. So for example, we have worked with an organization called Tiny Docs, which is primarily a media organization, and that was a 2016 cohort with Sunny, who's with Andrew and his cohort. And so his organization creates short films that explains healthcare to students and families in like an appealing, entertaining way. So that's semi-education, semi-media focused. Another fellow this year, Tony, who Elizabeth mentioned earlier, also does a media organization, and his is teaching media literacy, and also creates short films. We've been branching more into the mental health space. So one of our fellows this past year has this great organization, Ashley, where they provide mental health to make it more accessible. They provide it via basically text messages to teenagers. And that's a great organization at supporting mental health education, but it also is a direct service and technology and works more in the mental health space. So education primarily, but we are interested in supporting organizations that, you know, are building strong communities. Not sure if anyone else has anything they want to add on to that. Cool. We have some good questions in the chat box. I'm going to throw these to Aaron. There are two questions. Does sector-based education count, i.e. AG education for kids? And then what about work readiness through education? I'm going to let Aaron take those. Agriculture, AG equals agriculture. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, I was curious what AG meant. I'll take the second one first, since I wasn't unsure with the first one. Work readiness. Yes, I think you know, that fits within the parameters. We have worked with some ventures in the post-secondary space before. You know, organizations that are working on persistence or trying to create better pipelines for students that are, you know, in post-secondary to get to workforce. You know, even one of the schools that we supported in our first class in 2015, Jonathan Johnson, with a school called Rooted School. You know, part of it is how do you create a high school where kids can actually go to college, but also be able to get an entry-level job in digital media right out of high school. And so, yes, there's an education aspect to it, but it very directly goes to sort of workforce issues. In terms of agriculture education for kids, I guess I would want to know a little bit more about, I mean, and what you mean by that, and that may be like a side question, you know, so something that we can take offline. But my first inclination is not to say no. I guess I just want to know a little bit more to answer that question fully.
Cool. Let's see. There was a question about applying last year and having made it to round 2 and getting feedback. We're still not sure if we're going to be able to provide feedback for previous applicants and for this year's applicants. We're a pretty small team. We're about to hire someone new, which is exciting. As you may have counted, there's only 4 of us right now. So we want to be able to provide as much equal opportunity to everybody for feedback. So either we want to be able to do it for everybody or we can't do it for everyone. So that is a good question, and we will let you know on that one. Right now, we may not be able to do it, but we can definitely try. Let's see. This is a great question. Is one monetization favored more than another? For example, a nonprofit ed tech company over a for-profit ed tech company. Aaron, do you want to take that one? Oh, Aaron, I think you might be muted.
Sorry, I was at a different point in the chat. Can you just say the question one more time?
It's is one monetization favored more than another? For example, a nonprofit ed tech company versus a for-profit ed tech company.
No, I mean we have supported for-profits and nonprofits over the last 3 years, probably about an equal split. Maybe if leaning towards nonprofits, but we don't have like a preference or a point of view on like whether you do your ed tech as a for-profit or nonprofit, whatever form you think is the best to get the results that you are looking for. So none is favored over the other.
I'm sorry. I'd just like to interject. My name is Jerome. I'm with Urbed. I apologize for logging in so late. I had a family emergency come up just now. I'm the down here find the login ID. So again, I apologize for the interrupting being late. But yeah, I'm Jerome. I'm the development director for Urbed and representing us in the webinar here.
Cool, welcome. Do you have we're doing Q&A now, so if you've got a question, you're welcome to jump in. And that goes for everyone else too. Everyone's being awesome in the group chat. I wish I could read quickly, or read as quickly as I would like to. But if you have a question, feel free to just unmute yourself and talk at this point too, but we can also keep doing the chat box.
I'm Kimberly Moore. I have a question in the chat box, but I'll ask it here. I'm CEO and co-founder of Go Together. It's a platform that schools subscribe to help their parents build community and create carpools so their kids can get to and from school and from school to activities. And I'm just curious to see whether or not we would be a good fit. You know, obviously, we're not a traditional ed tech platform, but we do see and get feedback on the value and the importance of getting kids to school, right? And transportation is one of the top 3 reasons why kids go to some place who are not. So I'm just curious to see whether or not we might be a fit.
Yeah, I'll take that, Amanda. I mean, the short answer is yes.
I'm sorry?
So the short answer is yes. Like it would,
okay.
I think. Yeah, I mean, obviously the devil's in the details, but to answer your specific question, yes.
Okay, great, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Cool, how fishes, love it. I want to do a quick question from the box. Have any fellows started charter schools? If so, how hands-on is Camelback with the application process for opening a CS school? So I think, as far as I know, all the Camelback schools are charter schools, since that allows for more flexibility and innovative models. So that's a great question. Fellows are usually about a year and a half, 2 years out from opening their school when they're in the Camelback Fellowship. But we do have coaches who provide help, and we're building out some resources now that really break it down, the process from start to finish of applying for that charter application. So we do provide help, but fellows tend to be at different stages. For example, Jonathan, who Aaron was just talking about with Rooted, was a 2015 fellow, and he just opened a school. Wisdom, who is on the call, one of our fellows, he's a bit further out. So we try to provide help wherever we can, depending on where the fellow is at. I think someone's about to ask a question out loud, so I will let them do that.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Matt Stevenson. I'm co-founder and executive director of Code to College. We're a nonprofit that sources tech volunteers to teach students how to code twice a week, every week after school. And for the most successful students, we place them into paid summer internships. So my question is around some of those organizations who are alumni of Camelback, who maybe during the program or after the program struggled. Can you talk about some of the things that you think that they could have done better within the program to leverage all of the time and resources that you invest in your fellows?
I can maybe address this from a founder's perspective, and then if you guys want to follow up. So I think this is just a general good rule of thumb that is agnostic of a fellowship or an accelerator. But what tends to happen is you come in and you're like drinking from a fire hose, and there's all these resources, having gone through multiple accelerators that you're trying to take advantage of, and you just reasonably cannot, and you probably shouldn't be trying to do everything like 100%. So I think the most successful experiences I've had in accelerators, so I did one prior to Camelback, was coming in with very strategic goals and trying to align those goals with the offerings that Camelback has. So like I alluded to, like hiring and managing teams. I knew at the time that we needed to bring on an engineering team, and we needed to start building like cultural norms, et cetera. So I set goals there, and I was very specific about how I addressed it. And that's just one example. That Camelback has a ton of workshops on a ton of different things and a lot of opportunities to really engage. But usually what tends to happen is you come in and you're just trying to do too much. You come out and you've learned a lot, but you haven't really like internalized it, and you don't know what to do next, despite having all the materials and workshops, etc. So come in with a strategic plan, align that to what Camelback offers, and then you can finish and know what to do next.
Oh, thank you, Andrew. Let's see, I saw that this is a question that Aaron might know the answer to. If the organization is operating under a fiscal sponsor, are they able to submit an application with Camelback Ventures?
The short answer is yes. We cannot deploy dollars to individuals. So if you are a nonprofit and you don't have a 501c3, you need to have a fiscal sponsor. And if you are running a for-profit company, we can't write a check to your personal bank account. So please make sure you have some sort of corporation, LLC, C Corp, whatever that we can deploy funds to.
Cool. Sorry, there's so many good questions in here. For the so here's a question: is a solid website / social media presence an indicator of moving beyond the idea phase? For different ventures, it has a different purpose. One of our school founders did not have a website when she started with Camelback. And was still using her personal email address, but partially that's because a lot of her meetings were very in-person conversations where she was pitching her innovative school model and was bringing in documents with her. So the website didn't really have as big of a need for her. For someone, for example, Yanel, and maybe she can talk a little bit about this, she is doing community advocacy and organizing work. And so I imagine that for her, not only was it showing a movement beyond the idea phase, but that's something that she needed to use to show teachers, parents, to share information and discuss. I think also for EdTech founders like Andrew, if they are already piloting or trying to sell their product, it helps to have a website. It's not so I guess the answer is you don't have to have a website or social media, but it does give a sense, depending on your field, for how you're doing so far and if you need it to share information. I don't know if a fellow wants to explain that more.
Just additional context. I didn't hire anybody to make a website for me before I applied. I did have a pretty good website, I thought, but I just made it on a website hosting platform that was free. I used Weebly. You can use Wix, whatever. So it doesn't have to be, at least for me, it didn't have to be super complicated.
Cool. So here's a question. We are a for-profit and need contributions to run the maker sessions. They do maker sessions for students in schools. We are in contact with some schools now, but most likely underestimating how many schools are interested. What happens if we get this number wrong? John, do you want to maybe take that one?
Yeah, I would say most organizations that come into our fellowship don't have all of the pieces hammered out. So the main thing that I'm looking to find out in the application is that you've put thought into your numbers and not that the numbers are 100% accurate. If you have research that backs up your numbers, great. If you have assumptions that you've used, let us know what they are. The more information that you can provide with us to why you've come up with numbers, that makes us a little bit, it allows us to make a better decision on whether or not those numbers make sense in a way that we think that you should move on through the application process and become a fellow.
Cool, thank you, John. I think I've got another one. What kind of KPI do you want to see in our application?
I would say that the thing that really is important to me and seeing an application is a story. Stories are one of the best ways to convey information to whomever you're talking to. And if you have metrics that you want to use that back up that story, then use them. But I wouldn't use metrics unless they had something that was tied to a purpose, that they had a reason why you'd be using them. So if the KPIs that you have as an organization are not well vetted or you haven't come up with them, there's no need to use them. I would just think about it as an opportunity to use data to reinforce your story.
Cool. Thanks, John. This may be another you, or this might be an Aaron. Do you support innovative private schools or primarily public/charter schools? Maybe it's an Aaron question.
I can answer that one. So we mainly support public charter schools. We have not supported private schools before, and I think that should hopefully answer your question.
Cool. This is an interesting question. They're all interesting, but this is interesting. So if a company has a similar value proposition to a former Camelback Fellows company, would it create a conflict for Camelback or any other implications, specifically for a for-profit ed tech company versus a school/nonprofit? Aaron, do you want to maybe take that one?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that is an interesting question. I sort of smiled when I saw that one. You know, look, here's the thing. In the past, we have supported organizations that have similar value propositions. To give you an example, in the current or the 2017 cohort, we had an organization called the Fellowship for Black Male Educators, run by Vincent Cobb from Philadelphia. You know, their mission was to increase the number of Black male teachers in the classroom, particularly starting in Philadelphia. In 2016, we supported Larry Irvin with a nonprofit called Brothers Empowered to Teach, where they had a similar mission, which was to increase the number of Black males in the classroom. You know, they were in New Orleans, but also had, you know, plans for expansion. And so, you know, I think we're open. I think we're open to the idea you know, of having companies in different cohorts or that might have a similar value proposition to a company or organization that we've supported in the past. So yeah, I don't think it's impossible, but I think it's an interesting question, and particularly for the for-profits, you know, it'll be something that will be a part of the conversation, right? Which is, you know, as we think about deploying, you know, limited resources and limited dollars, do we think that the value proposition for another organization doing the same thing is strong enough, right? Does it fit a different niche or a different geographic reach or tackling at a different angle or something like that? So yeah, so I guess to sum up it is, yes, we would do it. If I'm being honest, it probably would be a part of the conversation if you made it to, you know, the final rounds, like how that would work out.
Cool. Here's a question I think maybe that John could answer. How would you address spinning your proposal off of an already existing project?
Spending? Sorry.
Spinning, like they maybe were working on something else and then had a new idea.
Yeah, so I think that the way that I perceive that question is, you know, making sure that you don't run afoul of any legal implications, of course. And I cannot provide the legal advice side of it. But if you're doing a spin-off of what you're doing and you have, I guess, the political capital or social capital behind that, I would say that you should come to us with the idea. When we get applications, you may or may not be at the stage that Camelback can help you. But at the same time, we've been told that going through our application process is a supremely helpful mechanism for finding out what you need to do to build your organization. So even if it isn't a good fit for you right now, it might be a good fit for you later. And hopefully that answered the question.
Ooh, some more good questions. Let's do you get equity from your for-profit fellows? That's Aaron.
Yeah, I mean, the short to date, we have invested in our for-profit fellows as a convertible debt note. You know, so it essentially acts as debt until it converts to equity at some future date, depending on how the company does. I think our philosophy has been, if there is upside, we want to try to catch some of that financially for our organization, not because we're trying to enrich ourselves, but because it allows us to replenish our funds and continue to support a new class of fellows. And two, I think it's important for us to not create a two-tier system, particularly in the for-profit world, where folks who are not Camelback Fellows who are raising money get investment dollars and can say that they had someone believe in their idea enough to put money at risk, and folks of color and women get non-risk dollars. I think it just sort of creates this sort of two-tier system that doesn't benefit for-profit entrepreneurs, the founders of color in the for-profit space. So I just want to sort of provide some of the reasoning behind that, but the short answer to your question is yes.
Cool. More good questions. What is Camelback's general stance on education policy-oriented organizations? I know that that is something Camelback is interested in doing more of for the future. Maybe it'll be an Aaron or a John? Aaron question.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you summed it up well. We have supported PS 305 in Miami. We also had an organization in New York City that was doing stuff around organizing young people around a variety of different issues. So again, yeah, I think the short answer is yes. We would love to have a couple ventures within our current class that are sort of focused on education, advocacy, / policy issues, because we realize, what happens in the classroom matters, but there's a whole system around that that matters too, and how can we elevate folks like you now to do that work.
Cool. Next question, and there are a lot of great questions in the chat box, so if we don't get to them all today, we will try to answer. We'll follow up by email, or you can also send them to us anytime at, the next slide is apply@Camelback Ventures. So if we didn't answer your question by 4, then definitely just shoot us a note there. Here's another question that I think would be good to answer at large. How much does community impact and scale play into the selection process? John, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So the way that I think about scale for organizations is that there's a lot of hype around scaling. But I think that when I think about scale, I think scaling responsibly. Are you still meeting the needs of the community that you intend to serve by scaling? Are you trying to create impact that is less impactful by having more people that you are reaching? So I wouldn't, if you're trying to reach 4,000 people through your program, that's great. But if you're trying to reach 10 people through your program in a very intentional way that results in high impact, then that to me is also an organization that we're interested in. Hopefully that answers your question.
Cool. Just got a question in there. How many fellows will be selected? So we will likely be doing 12 fellows for the 2018 cohort. I know Aaron's mentioned that number might go up, but right now we're looking at probably 12. And that should be a pretty even mix of schools, for-profits, and nonprofits. We also support hybrids, so that would probably fall under the for-profit bucket. But yeah, it'll be about 12. And that will be from a range of places and locations. This is a question about private schools. Aaron, wondering if private schools have not been your fellows for a particular reason. Should we apply, or is it really just not something you're looking to support at this time?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think part of our calculus is just trying to understand, how our dollars can sort of bring a school to fruition. And so, in a world of limited slots and limited resources, like we see a clear path and have the kind of connections to really help charter schools do that and understand what that path looks like and can help them on it. I wouldn't say that the private school aspect is 100% within our sweet spot on it, and we haven't necessarily sort of seen the use case where our dollars could eventually lead, to the opening of a school. So it's not out of the realm of possibility, but I think, as part of what we are trying to assess in the selection process is, yes, everyone's venture and all those things, but we want to respect our time, but also your time, and try to select ventures for whom we could actually really help get to the next step. And so there's always just an analysis around those things. I would say if you were particularly interested in launching a private school, that sort of serves the populations that Camelback cares about. I had a conversation with someone from the Drexel Fund that essentially is, an incubator accelerator for individuals who want to start private schools, where the commitment is that a third of the students would be classified as quote unquote low income. So I would Google that if it's of interest to whoever's, I'm sorry, I'm not following the chat box, but whoever's asking the question, I'm happy to make a connection to the people who make decisions there. And, I don't think it's an either or decision, but we want to be as helpful as we can, whether it be with Camelback or somewhere else, or both.
Cool. Thank you all for all the great questions and for engaging with us on this. This is the first webinar where such a big portion of it has been Q&A, so it's great to see everybody's questions. One of the last questions was, what's the estimated decision time once application is completed? And that is a great segue into wrapping up. So this link that is on the screen now, camelbackventures.org/apply. We've attempted to answer as many things that we think people could possibly ask, and that is a totally fair question on decision timing. We have a graphic on there now, and it's also available in a PDF format of the timeline for the application process. It's going to be 3 rounds, like John said, and so it should be, I'm not sure of the exact time between round 1 ending and the announcement, but I believe it's somewhere between 10 days to 2 weeks or so, give or take, but the exact information is all there. Like I said, we're a small team, so we may end up having to push things back, but we will try our best not to. And so if we do, though, we would always give you a heads up via email in various places, because we want to make sure you have all the information as up to date as possible. Okay? Thank you so much for joining and sharing. If you have questions, email us at address. We'll go ahead and wrap up now. Well, thank you, guys.